Hey everyone, it's the Miserable Movie Man, back again with another video. Yeah, I know it's been quite a long time since my last one, but things have been pretty busy with work, kids, and everything else going on in the world. But here I am again with another opinion video. This opinion is definitely going to be in the minority category. In fact, I would possibly say it's an unpopular opinion. But I'm an older guy and I grew up watching the original Battlestar Galactica, which I'm going to call OG BSG. And here's my video for 5 reasons why I think the OG BSG is better than the reboot. So, without any further ado, here we go. So the first point I want to make is the fact that a lot of people love the new Battlestar, or the rebooted Battlestar, for the fact that, you know, they tackled social issues. They, you know, it was a commentary on our world and our time. People were able to talk about the parallels to Guantanamo, and it was post 9/11, and there were themes in terms of torture and, you know, humanity and the lengths and depths to which we will go that were explored in the show. Now, to some extent, that's true. I mean, it's fair to say that the show did explore those themes, but the aspect of a science fiction drama exploring social issues is not new. I mean, Star Trek original series had it, but even OG BSG had it long before we had the reboot. And, you know, for its time, it was quite an impressive array of, you know, different takes on some of the social issues of the day. There was an episode where the pilots were all out and they had to have new pilots, and so they made all of the female survivors that were capable brand new Viper pilots. So it was definitely an episode showcasing women's and female equality. They had another episode about the inequity of the rich and the poor, and, you know, in the episode, Starbuck and Apollo find out that actually the rich have been living secretly aboard another cruiser with monumental amounts of food that could be rationed out for everyone, as opposed to people going starving. So, you know, even an aspect of one of the supporting characters, Cassiopeia, who was called what was a socialator, not quite a full-on prostitute, more of a courtesan, somebody, you know, who is versed in the art of keeping folks company and can speak at length on a number of topics with intelligence and poise. But, you know, that character was shunned in their society, and Starbuck basically champions her. So, you know, it was really refreshing for me to see a lot of these social concepts being tackled in the original, the OG BSG, as opposed to the new one, which, you know, had its own take of things at the time. So I think accusing the new BSG of not of being the first science fiction drama to really commentate on those types of things is completely false. OG BSG did it before that, and they did it pretty well, in my opinion. I mean, I'll even add the fact that you know, back in those days we had another character, Jolly, who was, you know, pretty rotund, I will say, and wasn't in the best shape. So it was definitely refreshing to see a supporting character not looking like a traditional leading man as well. Second point I want to make is that 1978, you know, things had been moving progressively from a race perspective, but they still weren't anywhere near what it is today. But, you know, as a kid, for me, watching TV, I didn't get exposed to a lot of people of color, and I'm a, you know, British Asian male, and 2 of the main supporting characters were black, so Colonel Ty and Boomer. And Boomer was a partner to Starbuck and Apollo, and really almost they're equal in many ways. I mean, he didn't have the rank that Apollo did, but he was often along on many of the missions, and, you know, second to both of them in terms of hierarchy of the Viper pilots. But then you had Colonel Ty, who was one of my favorite characters in the series. I think the way that character was portrayed, I mean, I personally think he was a bit of a badass, but, you know, really, he had gravitas, he had elegance, he had intelligence, he is a real perfect number 2 for Adama, and seeing that back in the late 70s was pretty, I wouldn't say groundbreaking, but pretty bold and daring for its time. So I really think that that diversity aspect was done well, at least for the product of its time that OG BSG had. Third point, and this is a point I could spend an entire video on, but honestly, the plot for new BSG made absolutely no sense to me. I mean, if I just list off some of the ridiculous things that I witnessed when trying to watch it. Now, granted, I think the first couple of seasons were pretty good for the reboot, but then 3 and 4 just got ridiculous. I mean, the hook on the first episode, and by the way, spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen it, but the Cylons are back and they have a plan, and Boomer is a Cylon. Okay, what was their plan? I don't think their plan was ever fully thought through or realized. It made no sense. 12 perfect human clones that the Cylons made, who've been living for thousands of years, and they come together to a Bob Dylan song. I mean, that was one of the aspects of the show that I thought made no sense. The plot meandered so ridiculously from week to week that I kind of lost track of it to some degree. I didn't really care what was going on. I mean, who was the president this week? It was Adama, it was Apollo, it was Rosalind. There were so many... Boltar. I mean, what was going on? Every few weeks there's another president. I thought that, the usage of Apollo as well in the show was not particularly thought out. It's almost as if they didn't care about the character. I mean, they were much more concerned with showing, Adama and Rosalind and Starbuck going through different things as well as what was going on with the Cylons. In the OG BSG, Apollo was a lead. He was, the moral glue of a lot of the show, and he was the archetypical, stereotypical to some degree, leading man. But in the new show, Apollo had self-doubt. He, wasn't even that well liked by some of his teammates. He, flitted from being a Viper pilot to a commander to a president to a lawyer, fell in and out with his father. I really just think they had no clue where to go with Apollo. And then let's get on to some of the other silly things that they did. So, I mean, Starbuck being an angel and disappearing. I mean, disappearing and coming back as an angel. Half human, half Cylon hybrids who land on the second Earth during the time of the dinosaurs. So I guess we find out that our Earth isn't the real Earth and there was another Earth. It really was just pretty ridiculous to some degree. I mean, all of these aspects of the plot that made no sense were things that I thought were not appealing to me for the reboot. And I thought, at least, you can't say that the plots for the OG BSG were really intricate, but they had a theme, they had a journey, they definitely had a consistency in sort of what they were trying to achieve, and I felt new BSG made no sense after about season 2. Fourth point, characters. A lot of what I care about is character, which is why I'm not a big fan of the Star Wars sequels. And similar, the reboot had characters I really did not care one frack about. The OG BSG, I really cared about those characters. I really thought that these were folks I wanted to see week in, week out, being tested and battling evil and trying to overcome. They had morals, they had character, they had decency, they were a real family. You got a real sense of the family of the survivors being, on this journey together when you watch OG BSG. But, you saw Adama, how much he loved Apollo and Athena. I mean, he was everyone's dad. He lost his son in the pilot for a valid reason this time around, as opposed to the reason that happened in the reboot. You love Boxy. those characters, Apollo, Starbuck, Boomer, Athena, Cassiopeia, all of them are great characters, and I really enjoyed, seeing them, even Sheba later on. For the new BSG, the reboot, I really didn't care or like any of the characters except Baltar. I think Baltar was the only one that I felt was very well written, very interesting, and extremely watchable. And I think he's comparable to his original series counterpart, and maybe to some degree, as he's more fleshed out, would surpass him. And Baltar's machinations in OG BSG and the reboot were really great to watch. But the other characters in the new version I did not care for. I mean, Adama was at times a genocidal madman who was willing to do anything to complete his mission. I mean, including nuking his own kind who were on the temple, trying to assassinate Cain, veering from being good in some episodes and having PTSD, and really just being, I mean, maybe more of a fully fleshed out character, but just not a character I cared much for. Starbuck I felt was a pretty useless hothead. I mean, in terms of character development, she had guilt and other things to process, but again, I think she hooked up with Apollo later on as well, so not a character I really cared about. As I said, Apollo, they just didn't really know what to do with him. I didn't find him that interesting, and Boomer was just confused most of the time. I think, what were they going to do with her once she was outed? It was always, how do we create tension by making choices that seem drastic but really don't do the character justice. So that was the thing about the characters. I didn't like the new ones, really. Didn't care for any of them, but I really still enjoy watching the old OG BSG characters. Watching the reboot really gives me no hope for our future, or I guess past. Everyone on the reboot was, petty, vindictive, violent, which people will say, are realistic human character traits, but I prefer to see those, in a drama, and not to say they don't have a place in sci-fi, but I think they were overdone and exaggerated to a point in the reboot that just made them too stark in contrast for me. Original Battlestar Galactica had good characters who did have some growth. Apollo had to deal with loss, Adama had to deal with loss, and people were desperately trying to get to grips with their situation. Final point before I get on to the honourable mentions. OG BSG, in my opinion, was original. Now, many folks will claim that it's a Star Wars ripoff, and in fact, George Lucas did even sue the makers of the show, but at least I think if you watch the original series, it's pretty obvious that a lot of thought and creativity went into it. The new BSG took all the old concepts and tried to reinvent them for the the new show with varied success, in my opinion. But I mean, OG BSG had to come up with so many things. They had 12 tribes of man, Centons and Yarans, Socialators, Triad Pyramids, Ambrosia, so many concepts. The writers truly created a whole separate culture that was relatable to our own, but uniquely distinct and fully realized. The creator of the show, Glenn Larson, was a Mormon, and I mean, he created some great shows, but he did try to take a lot of his beliefs and transpose them into the show. And I think it created a really great universe. It was a separate culture that was relatable to our own, but uniquely distinct and fully realized. So, I mean, while watching OG BSG, I never got the impression that these humans were just like us, but in a space setting. They felt more like cousins. They had their own history and their own way of thinking and their own way of talking, and their own concepts. I thought Pyramid was really cool. I thought Triad was really cool. The new show, to me, didn't really create all that much. I mean, they did come up with some reasonable backstories, especially later on, and they tried to modernize some of the ideas and concepts that didn't exist back then. But I mean, when I watched it, I felt like it hit a little bit too close to home. It just transplanted, our current views and our current idiosyncrasies into a space setting. OG BSG to me always strive to be more than that with their creativity, and even episodes like The Long Patrol try to showcase new ideas. So that's it. Those are the 5 reasons, and obviously I can come up with more, I think, where, for the reasons I believe and I prefer the original Battlestar Galactica OG BSG over the reboot. The reboot is critically and commercially acclaimed. I think it had so many fans, even people who are non-sci-fi fans enjoyed it as well. But to me, I will always prefer the original Battlestar Galactica for the reasons I said and many more. It had a unique place in our culture, a unique place in our time. It really helped, I think, progress many things in TV history. Okay, on to the honourable mentions. First one, I think, is the theme music. Listen, I'm sorry, people may love the postmodern angst that the new, rebooted music intro tries to convey, but to me it does not come close to the magnificent fanfare of the original Battlestar music. I mean, when I hear that music, the sense of grandeur that the theme gives off was enough to set up any episode. So I thought the original theme was amazing. Still do. Anytime we watch it, it just gives me goosebumps. Second point were the Cylons. These were some badass robots for the original show. I mean, they looked mean and they terrified some kids back in the day. Even now, I think that look is completely iconic. And when I watched the new show, the new Cylons really didn't scare anyone. Well, at least that's how I felt. And I, by the way, I'll be very happy to test that theory by being in the same room with either Tricia Helfer or Grace Park. But, even when they showed the toasters as they were, it still didn't quite have the same impact or even aesthetic that the original Cylons had. I don't think they'll be top, to be honest. They were amazingly created. And finally, the writing. I saw an article or a reference once that somebody had written that, the new Battlestar Galactica or the reboot is so clever to come up with swear words that sound like our own but aren't, so they can get past the censors. I mean, the word frack, which has become part of popular culture, is amazing, and we owe the new Battlestar Galactica the credit for coming up with that. But clearly that person was not born or at the time original Battlestar came out, or didn't even do the research, because in OG BSG had it first. Frack was an amazing term. I was using it at school as a kid sometimes. Came out with the original series. People used it. I think they tweaked the spelling a little bit for the reboot, but it was such an inventive way to get around the censor. And it wasn't just frack. I mean, I also used Felgercarp as well, which might be a little bit too much to say, but I think the creative writing in terms of getting away with some of the things that they said, even Socialator, Felgercarp, frack, all these things I think were wonderful. And I think if you don't give OG BSG's credit for that, then we're doing the show a disservice. So there you go. That was my reasons. Those were my honourable mentions. If you agree, disagree, let me know in the comments below. I'm sure there will be a lot of fans of the reboot that will disagree with everything I said. So happy to hear your views. Also, if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and share the video wherever you can. And I will see you all next time. Take care, stay safe.